You're listening to Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. We're coming to you from the unceded traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh nations around Vancouver, BC. I'm your host, Bernadine Fox, and this is the show that dares to change how we think about mental health. Welcome to Rethreading Madness.
When I've never been further, knowing what the hell I'm gonna do. When I can't seem to find my way under or over.
Today I'm speaking with David Oakes and his partner, Deborah Nunes. David is a civil rights activist who was the co-founder and former executive director of Mind Freedom International based in Eugene, Oregon. Mind Freedom is an independently funded nonprofit that actively fights for the human rights of those with lived experience of mental health challenges. It is accredited by the United Nations as a non-governmental organization, essentially an NGO, with CR status, which means they are consulted on matters important to mental health. As they say, Mind Freedom International is where democracy is finally getting hands-on with the mental health system. They challenge abuse by the psychiatric drug industry, support psychiatric survivors and mental health consumers, and promote safe and humane and effective options in mental health. And they have been doing it since the Mad Pride Revolution started in the 1970s. As they say on their website, in a spirit of mutual cooperation, Mind Freedom leads a nonviolent revolution of freedom, equality, truth, and human rights that unites people affected by the mental health system with movements for justice everywhere. Up until 2012, Oakes was their executive director, and then he fell from a ladder, a fall which broke his neck and left him paralyzed. And I say this not because it is important to the work he continues to do, but as a segue into understanding that David currently is unable to speak in the manner he once did. However, rather than suppress or silence his very powerful voice, we are interviewing him. His partner, Deborah Nunes, will be a part of this interview, and you may hear her every once in a while help make clear what he is saying. It is difficult at times to hear him clearly, and it may be helpful while listening to close your eyes. However, we have also included a transcript of this interview on our website, and if you would like to listen to it while reading the transcript, you can do so at www.rethreadingmadness.ca. So that's www.rethreadingmadness.ca. If you want to search for that now, we will take a quick break and be right back.
The National Greening Program run by Tree Canada is dedicated to planting seedling trees across Canada in BC, the Prairies, Ontario, Quebec, and Atlantic. They prioritize planting on Indigenous and public lands and planting in areas of natural or human-caused disaster. The trees they plant help filter the air and water and sequester carbon, among other positive impacts. To learn more or get involved, go to treecanada.ca.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and today I get to speak with David Oakes and his partner, Deborah Nunes, about his work for all folks who are psychiatric survivors dealing with mental health challenges, but also, more importantly, about his work with Mind Freedom. And we'll get to what Mind Freedom is in a minute. Welcome, David and Deborah.
Thanks, Bernadine.
So, David, can you tell us, you ended up in a psych ward. How did that happen? What happened? What landed you there?
I was a working class young man from Chicago.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I was under a lot of stress and pressure as a scholarship student at Harvard. And so I just broke under that. I took too many substances, and I got overwhelmed, and I began entering an altered state, so-called psychotic. But for me, it was kind of a breakthrough about my emotions, but it was very difficult. I think the TV was talking about me personally.
Right.
So when Harvard authorities placed me in a psych facility, in a way I did need help. I did need help, but what I found was a real attack on my dignity and my self-respect. As soon as I entered the ward, they tried to drug me. When they refused, I was put in solitary confinement and held down on a mattress and forcibly drugged. So this was in the mid 1970s. As a teenager, I was needing support, understanding, peer counseling, counselor, some respite, but instead I got trauma.
So your trip to the psych ward was not helpful. It was traumatic by the sounds of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, every story I hear about people going to the psych ward is traumatic. And I think people think that, you're told, if you're having trouble, and you think you might hurt yourself or you think this, just go to the hospital. But I'm waiting to hear a story of somebody going to the hospital and actually getting treatment in such a way that it was helpful. You said that it attacked your dignity. Is that partly that they put you in solitary confinement, or were there other things that happened?
Well, the attitude was very authoritarian, controlling. Over the decades, I met some lucky people who found help and support, in an institution, but even lucky ones support our human rights agenda. And generally, what I found is this empowerment, kind of an attitude of contempt, not really interested in my inner self. And again, emphasis on drug. The drugs were horrible.
Right.
Then there were major tranquilizers or neuroleptics. Now they're known as antipsychotics.
Right.
Or the same big family of drugs that endorsing Haldol, Malderel, Navane were drugs I was given. Now it's like Abilify, Clozapine, Risperdal. There are dozens of trade names, and they felt like a real cement in my brain, like a wrecking ball through the cathedral of my mind. And when I was in solitary confinement, being held down and ejected, it felt really degrading. Right at my most vulnerable time when I needed help, I was given trauma, and that actually is what I call my recruitment room, because I was at the steel mesh window and looking out alone, and I pounded the thing with my fist, and I said, when I get out of here, I'm gonna do some major damage to this system.
I
And
love that. I'm glad
yeah,
that that's where you went with it, because I think our world has benefited from your anger. So let me get this straight. Let me see if I've understood you. You were a teenager, you were in Harvard, you had a lot of pressure. You started using substances, sorry, to deal with some of that stress. You kind of went into an altered state, and instead of getting support and help to come back to what wasn't an altered state, you ended up in the hospital in solitary confinement with a mattress on the floor and mesh on the windows. You were unable to get out, and they were holding you down, giving you Haldol and Thorazine, which is the equivalent of antipsychotics today. So I don't know those things, and they're both antipsychotics. Haldol stops you from hallucinating. Um, so um, did they stop you from hallucinating?
I found it to be really negative. I needed my mind to
Mhm.
recover. I needed support, connection, community, people, and I felt really flattened out, destroyed really by
Right.
the drugging. And what helped me back in the 70s, there's kind of a revolutionary perspective, because there was so much social change. So I brought a real attitude of empowerment,
Mm,
activism, revolution to my circumstances. I
right.
was very rebellious. So yes, I needed real help, compassionate help, but I felt a real degradation.
Well, I don't think you were treated like a human being. I think you were treated like a body that needed to be warehoused and needed to be kept under control and quiet while they were warehousing you, by the sounds of it. Did they give you support groups? Did a therapist talk to you? Did you?
I was in McLean Hospital, Harvard's teaching hospital,
Mm,
often voted one of the best institutions in the world. But when I met with the psychiatrist, that was actually one of my worst moments, because here's this bright Harvard psychiatrist a few feet from me talking eye to eye, and he said, David, you have a biochemical genetic imbalance. You will need these medicines for life. And that lie right there took me a long time to deconstruct and dismantle.
mm,
And if someone believes that and chooses psych drugs, I can understand that. That's a personal health care decision.
right.
But the fraud, the lies, being told you have an imbalance, that these drugs will fix, you have to stay on them for life. That was horrible. They didn't offer me choices. The main support group was about taking our psych drugs. There's I did see a counselor who was a bit helpful in this mess, or traumatic mess. Strangely, what helped me was Vietnam era psychiatry, because many of those locked up in McLean had been there for many months, but in the 70s, they were trying to treat people more quickly, give them months like drugs, get them out. That actually helped, because some people ended up in McLean for months or years, electroshocked and drugged. All those old buildings are connected by tunnels, so one never really got free. So in a way, that helped. And certainly the activism helped. I connected up with other psychiatric survivors, and that really was crucial.
Yeah. There is something really profound that happens when you are in the company of people who have experienced even parts of your life, and you get to share and hear and know and get it how normal you are for what you've gone through. Are you still taking psychiatric drugs?
No, I actually stopped when I got out of Harvard.
Okay.
In 1977 is when I graduated, and that was my last dose. I was forcibly coerced into being drugged.
So were you forced to take it while you were at Harvard, like finishing your school?
No, I was told I'd be kicked out. I'd be expelled unless I followed doctor's orders. And one positive thing at Harvard, I connected up with those big volunteer agency that had a history of being progressive. And they connected me up with one of the early psychiatric survivor groups, Mental Patients Liberation Front. And I was an intern, placed as an intern, and that changed my life. I've been doing their work since for 47 years. So they helped place me as a community organizer.
Right. Okay. We just need to take a little break, folks, but we're going to be right back with David and Deborah talking about mind freedom, and because it's the 20th anniversary of your hunger strike. So we're going to get right into that as soon as we're back.
Co-op Radio is listener supported and listener owned. As a Co-op Radio member, you can join the broadcasters who create and present radio shows, as well as have a say in the station's management. You'll own a part of the station. All this for just as little as $5 a month. And tax deductible too. For details, go to coopradio.org and press the donate button. That's coopradio.org.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm Bernadine Fox, and I'm chatting with David Oakes and his partner, Deborah Nunes. Welcome back, both of you. Hello. So, David, you were a part of this community organization, the Mental Liberations Front. Did I get that right?
Mental
Patients Liberations Front.
Yeah. And we connected up with several dozen other efforts.
Wow.
Before they endured it using mail and phone.
Well, that's good. How did Mind Freedom come out of that? And did Mind Freedom come before the hunger strike, or how did all that happen?
Yeah, what we psychiatric survivors found over the years by the 80s that there was funding by the government for mental health consumer groups, and that's nice. But there's one thing the government did not fund, which was activism. Vermont human rights organizing. So a number of us psychiatric survivors gathered together in the late 1980s and formed Mind Freedom International as a way to have an independent voice. Yeah, we had several names. So, some people in other movements might not understand, but imagine the whole environmental movement is only funded by the EPA and oil companies. That's what it is often like in disability organizing. Our people are so poor. There's
Right.
no NAACP or independent organized. So that's what we did as start Mind Freedom to be an independent beacon of activism.
Right. So Mind Freedom was set up to be to do political activism, to make changes happen on a political scale.
Right. And,
Yeah. So
Yeah.
at what point did you do the hunger strike? It's a 20-year anniversary, so that would be in 2003?
Yep. We organized Mind Freedom for years. And then what happened is for 3 years, we got several dozen of us together for a strategy session, including at Highlander, which is famous for activists for people, BIPOC organizing, and we talked about the enormous fight we had. It felt like a tsunami avalanche heading us, the amount of oppression, and we organized a bunch of us a hunger strike, and it took months to prepare because there was a lot of strategy involved with the hunger strike.
And where did sorry.
Go ahead, Bernadine.
Where did the hunger strike take place? Was it in different places? Did you go to one central place, or did people just do it in their homes, or?
A bunch of us got to Los Angeles, where Mickey Weinberg, who's, Mickey is one of the main organizers. Their strategy was that you were not just fighting the medical model, a lot of people just thought were anti-drug or anti-medical model. But this is important. We were anti-oppression, anti-use of fraud and force. If someone believes in the medical model of their distrust, that's fine.
Mhm.
But what we said is, if you are going to use the medical model to force us to have treatment, where is the evidence?
Right.
Show us a lab test, a brain scan, anything, any proof, any expert. And we had a panel of scientific advisors work closely with us, and we actually engaged the American Psychiatric Association in the back and forth, and it got international media, and we won.
Mm-hmm.
The APA
Yeah, no kidding.
admitted in writing that they have no evidence about this theory of a chemical imbalance.
Yes. So let me just take folks back just a tad because um, so not everybody may know this, that there was a sort of a switch somewhere in psychiatry where they kind of moved from, well, not from, I'll say they moved to this notion that it was a chemical imbalance and that caused you to be depressed or schizophrenic or all kinds of things, right? And the push was, if you take this chemical, i.e. this pill, then it will correct your chemical imbalance and you will be fine. Is that correct?
That's the
Yes. Okay.
whole theory.
And what's become clear is that there doesn't seem to be any evidence. It is clear that in some cases it seems to work for people. And I'm hearing you say that that's okay for them, that that's working for them, then that's great. But you were saying that you guys wanted to see the evidence that there was this chemical imbalance that caused these mental health challenges. And I think that that's reasonable. People don't really understand that a lot of psychiatry is based on ideas and theories and thoughts and a vote, and not much of it has the backing of evidence. So what you were asking for was a very real thing, and what you got was a statement that said that. Let me see if I can find it here quickly. That they conceded that brain science has not advanced to the point where scientists or clinicians can point to readily discernible pathological lesions or genetic abnormalities that in and of themselves serve as reliable or predictive biomarkers of a given mental disorder or mental disorders as a group. And yeah, you won. That's
Yeah, and there was a Washington Post, LA Times, BBC, Washington Post, NPR. We got that out, the truth. So, yeah, it's still wrong to oppress us, even if we had a chemical imbalance. But they're lying.
Right.
And many of the people in the public have been misinformed by the industry. And it can kill you if you take the wrong drug for too long. It can cause brain damage.
Right.
Or
And that's
Yeah.
kind of, as I learn more and more and more, it's becoming clear to me that brain damage seems to be the side effect of a lot of interventions from the mental health industry. So, I mean, ECT seems to be the most obvious example of that, in that the manufacturers of ECT have said that that one of the side effects is brain damage. We don't live in a society that will even allow the who is it in the States that confirms medications are good down there? The FDA, right? Yes. Even the FDA tried to do some studies on whether or not ECT was still viable and a good, treatment, and psychiatrists got in the way and said no. And now there is sort of a forever moratorium on any qualitative research on whether or not ECT is working.
The electroshock is kind of in limbo, but I think keeping is a lot of a shock can have human rights problems, but incredibly burdening. Incredibly, a few people a year get forced shock over and against their expressed clear wishes, involuntarily court ordered. And whenever we've gotten that out to the public, we get immense amount of support. I say almost everybody supports us on the red, blue, whatever, I've only found one group to support forced shock, the APA itself.
The APA?
American Psychiatric Association. That's
Why do you think that? I mean, I want to get into this discussion of why. Why are they so reluctant to to thoroughly look at what it is they're doing and how it is impacting on people? I live in Canada, you live in the United States, and up here ECT is making a comeback, and even I know a psychiatrist who had ECT done, and I said, are you sure that's what you want to do? And she said, oh, it's very different than before, and is it's not that harmful, it's done very differently, so it's okay. And she came out of it with no memory intact. Like she, I shouldn't say no memory, but her memory was very, very impaired. And even 2 or 3 years later, it was still very impaired. And then she had a stroke, and she never survived the stroke. Ultimately, she never came back. So the other thing that I heard that was shocking is that lobotomies are coming back, but they're calling it psychosurgery or some nice name. So we're talking brain damage. We're talking about invasive treatments. And honestly, I think when you're putting drugs into somebody's brain and body, it's just as invasive as a lobotomy, quite frankly. We need to take another break. Sorry, folks. We'll be right back.
Did you know that Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, has over 90 different shows produced by over 350 community members? This wide range of programming produced by our diverse group of programmers ensures that we have a show you'll love. We have shows on feminism, spirituality, disability rights, politics, unions, and parenting. We play jazz, indie rock, reggae, blues, and folk. We broadcast in a dozen different languages and have more First Nations programs than any other radio station in Vancouver. Find your show on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. All different, all the time.
You're listening to Rethreading Madness on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM. I'm speaking with David Oakes, co-founder of Mind Freedom, and Deborah Nunez. So David, we were talking about different kinds of treatment and how they actually cause brain damage. And I was wondering whether or not you had more to add to that.
yeah, the drugs I was given were the family of drugs now called antipsychotics. And if I had stayed on those drugs for decades, I'd almost certainly have brain damage. The mainstream studies are that long-term use of these drugs can actually shrink the brain, literally shrink the brain. Plus, you have a high risk of permanent twitching called tardive dyskinesia. Yeah. But really, even before these drugs, for centuries, we've been oppressed. And
Right.
I have asked that same question you have, why,
Yeah.
over and over. And really, it has to do with social control. We ask, why are we allowing climate crisis and economic inequality? Why are we fighting back? And it's because of social control. And I'm not saying all crazy thoughts are good, but the people who first think them are often called crazy. Martin Luther King over and over called for creative maladjustment.
Right.
He said we should be maladjusted to oppression. But you're right, Bernadine. Currently, electroshock is growing, and yes, even psychosurgery is done. Many people don't know little Victory, though. Back in the 70s, our leaders helped on a fight to declare forced psychosurgery illegal. So
Right.
there's no outright involuntary psychosurgery. The same should be done now, but shock and long-term forced drugs that can cause brain damage.
Right. And you were saying that some of these cause chemical lobotomies.
Quite literally, quite the frontal lobes.
Hmm.
That's a kind of our brain for that is lost. There we, higher level functions, the long-term use of the drugs can actually damage the antipsychotics in the long run. But really, it's about the oppression.
Yes.
Even before the drugs, this attitude of us marginalized people. We need to get out that our movement even exists and to connect with other marginalized voices, LGBT, BIPOC, youth. We need to be side by side.
Right. I agree. I don't understand why it's so important to oppress folks who have mental health challenges. I just know it happens all the time. It happens very easily. It happens without people even noticing it sometimes. That it's like, well, of course we don't want that person talking. It's like our society doesn't get it that what we are doing to an entire group of people. You fell from a ladder recently.
Yeah, yeah. About 10 years ago, I was trying to get a kid Bongo off of Loft. Bongo's right here.
Bongo was up in the loft and David had climbed a really thin ladder. And you have AS, of course, so you couldn't look up.
And arthritis of the spine, and anyway, I
Now-
fell. And, thankfully, I called Deborah as a paralysis came up my body. I almost died there, right, Deborah?
Yeah,
Several times.
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And frankly, Deborah's a champion of disability. She was a force of nature.
Well, thank you, Deborah.
Uh-huh.
Right, Deborah,
What?
you're a heroine.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh yeah, she was.
So how did that change your life? I mean, it seems very obvious. It changed your life in big ways, right? Like you can't walk and you're having difficulty talking. And I know that you have difficulty with your hand. But how did it change your life in terms of your activism? Did it, or
well,
is it still the same?
Well, because my voice and hands were so impacted, I could not go back to work the same way. I help Mind Freedom as a consultant, but what helped me these past 10 years are the values and principles I learned in our movement about empowerment and community and advocacy and support, and all those values came to me very, very important. They were tools for my keeping on going. And a very strange, Bernadine, you might have some insight into this. Of course, I bridge the physical disability world
Right.
and mental health world, but it's a bit difficult to bridge those two. Part of it is that we psychiatric survivors have a revolutionary attitude, and of course we reject the labels and everything. So when it comes to the disability movement, many of us say, hey, I do not want to connect with that. I'm not disabled.
Right.
Meanwhile, many of the disability leaders do not know how diverse we are. That some people see themselves as disabled, but others do not. We need unity. There's a lot of diversity in our.
Do you think that the disability community has leaders that are also, inculcated in this idea that mental health consumers are frightening and we can't trust them and they're unreliable or they're weird or crazy or mad? Mad is my personal favorite word. But don't you feel that, I mean, it's easy right now we figured out wheelchairs, right? So people in wheelchairs don't scare people anymore. But I think people are afraid of somebody who has something different happening in their brain that they may not understand. And so it's easy just to shove us aside and not deal with us than deal with us and maybe have to deal with something that they don't understand.
I think whole disability movement needs more activism.
Mm,
I mean, we're potentially one of the biggest movements in the world. And we really need to encourage folks to organize.
mhm.
I work with both physical disability and mental health consumers and psychiatric survivors. And we all agree on human rights and empowerment and community building and voice. But yeah, there's a lot of diversity.
Yes.
In fact, a lot of times we have trouble even naming ourselves that we exist as a social change movement needs to get out. We call ourselves mental health consumers or psychiatric survivors. So often we call ourselves C/S. Many of us call ourselves people with lived
I
experience.
like that one.
Or yeah, you like
I
that,
do, people with lived experience, because that's everybody.
Yes,
right?
that's true.
Or people who are mental health peers.
Mhm.
I would say all of humanity deals with mental challenges.
Absolutely.
All of us do 100%.
Well, and then there's words like, freak, mad, crazy, insane. I had a conversation with JD Derbyshire, who's a comedian up here, about what word does she like, what does she call herself, and she liked the word mad. And I think we all have words that we like, and that is part of the diversity. But that diversity is also a part of what stops us from being able maybe to move forward using the power of numbers.
I love mad pride. I
Mm.
would encourage people to use hashtag mad pride more. And
Hashtag Mad Pride.
yeah, and Canada has been one of the leaders, especially Toronto. So
Mhm.
yeah, I'd say, then I would encourage us to connect with other movements
Right.
like the disability movement. It's huge, and many of them need info, a little bit of teaching, but generally disability leaders get it. They often deal with medical model
Mhm.
BS or oppression,
Right.
disempowerment, nursing homes. Many get it.
Yep.
And the public is more understanding on disability in general, rather than, well, for example, more and more you hear depressed, trauma survivor, spectrum, on the spectrum. But I was a diagnosed psychotic.
Mm-hmm.
And you do not hear many of us come out to the closet, you know, and say, hey, I'm a diagnosed psychotic. As a social suicide. I like the idea of a positive craziness.
Yes.
I call it the new PC, positive craziness.
Positive craziness. Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
PC, that's a good PC.
Sure
Well,
will.
Thank you so much for coming and chatting with me about this. We will have a transcript of this podcast for people to go and review. So thank you, David. Thank you, Deborah. And I hope I get to chat with you again soon.
Thank you for your work. I
Oh.
appreciate it.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Okay, folks, we'll be right back.
Do you feel unsafe in your home?
You are not alone.
Transition houses offer free support and shelter for women and children.
We are here for you.
We are here for you.
We are here for you.
Make the call.
1-800-VICTIM-LINK.
1-800-563-0808.
bcsch.ca.
And that's our show. I wanted to take a moment before we conclude here to remind everyone that it is the 20th anniversary of the Fast for Freedom in Mental Health, which David talked about during this interview. This hunger strike included 6 psychiatric survivors who came to Pasadena, California from around the USA. Their demand? That the mental health industry produce even one study proving the common industry claim that mental illness is a biologically based disorder. It charged that the pharmaceutical industry and psychiatry are medicalizing an ever-widening spectrum of human emotions and behavior for financial gain and willingly deceiving the public while all too often humiliating and harming their clients, or as we call them in the therapy abuse field, their victims. The hunger strike demanded the proof to validate their scientific claims, and after 12 days, what they got was a mea culpa in this statement, and I want to read it. What the APA forwarded was, "It is unfortunate that in the face of this remarkable scientific and clinical program, a small number of individuals and groups persist in questioning the reality and clinical legitimacy of disorders that affect the mind, brain, and behavior." Now, I don't think that's what Mind Freedom was doing, and it does sound here like they're about to be dismissed, doesn't it? But then they went on to admit that, in fact, Mind Freedom was correct. There is no scientific evidence that the medications they were pushing were linked to actual biological markers or deficits. Their mea culpa continued with the association also conceding that, quote, brain science has not advanced to the point where scientists or clinicians can point to readily discernible pathological lesions or genetic abnormalities that in and of themselves serve as reliable or predictive biomarkers of a given mental disorder or mental disorders as a group. Mental disorders will likely be proven to represent disorders of intercellular communication or of disrupted neural circuitry. Big words, right? So let's unpack that a bit. Likely to be proven means they're not proven yet, and they're hoping that that's where it's going. And intercellular communication means how your brain cells talk to each other. And neural circuitry basically means the way your synapses relay information to your nerve cells, which impair function. I also find it interesting how quickly a professional organization will try and prove their higher position by using terms that will throw the average Joe off. Completely an unnecessary thing in this situation. As Oakes, who participated in this hunger strike, noted, they acknowledged that they did not have the biological evidence of mental illness and demanded that the APA move beyond their narrow, reductionist, and biological model that was not based on scientific facts. I believe at this point it's also true, 20 years later, that the APA still has not been able to provide those scientific facts to back up their claim that mental health issues are based and rooted in chemical imbalances. Mind Freedom fights for the mental health consumer. If you are one of the 1 in 5, or love someone who is one of the 1 in 5 who deal with mental health challenges on a daily basis, you should know about their global work and reach. And you can find out more about Mind Freedom by visiting their website. And that is easily found at mindfreedom.org. So that's mindfreedom.org. Rethreading Madness is now aired on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM on Tuesdays at 5 p.m., on CJUM in Winnipeg on Monday at 9 a.m., and then on CKXU in Lethbridge on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. You can also find us on the Mental Health Radio Network and wherever you download your podcasts. My thanks to David Oakes and Deborah Nunes for joining me today. Our music was by Sherry Ulrich, and as always, my thanks goes out to you for joining us. You are the reason we are on the air. Stay safe out there. You've just listened to Rethreading Madness, where we dare to change how we think about mental health. We air live on Vancouver Co-op Radio, CFRO 100.5 FM, every Tuesday at 5 p.m. or online at coopradio.org. If you have questions or feedback about this program, or want to share your story, or have something to say to us, we want to hear from you. You can reach us by email, rethreadingmadness@coopradio.org. This is Bernadine Fox. We'll be back next week. Until then.
When I've never been further, knowing what the hell I'm gonna do. When I can't seem to find my way under or over or through. Just when I'm ready to give up the fight, there you are when we turn out the lights, and it's alright, it's alright, don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Yeah. Why don't I wonder how you know? Well, surely you don't have all of the facts. You could be just making it up. Why don't I ever think of that? It's some kind of magic in the words that you breathe, saying, baby, take it from me. It's alright, it's alright, don't you worry, it'll be alright. Why do I always believe it when you tell me everything's gonna be alright? Everything's gonna be alright. With anyone else, it's such a cliche, just words people say to be nice. Or somehow